Hello everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Catching Big Blue, Can Any BI Services Vendor Narrow the Gap with IBM? I'm Justin Surgeon, and I'm hosting today's webinar. Business intelligence and analytics services vendors lead through consulting and solutions engagements, helping companies determine their analytics and data strategies as they adapt to changing possibilities and applying business intelligence to business problems. TBR's research indicates IBM leads, while other vendors use alliances, acquisitions, and homegrown IP to challenge IBM and win new clients. This webinar will explore how much is changing and how fast, and open a discussion around which kinds of BI services vendors will likely grow fastest in 2015. Before I pass this over to the analysts, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel and watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. We will address them at the end of the webinar or reach out directly to any of us for that discussion. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on our SlideShare at slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce the team presenting today. Patrick Heffernan is a principal analyst for TBR's professional services practice, where he directs the practice's syndicated portfolio and cultivates and manages projects on topics ranging from management consulting to firms' financial advisory services to emerging technologies. Hristov is an analyst here at TBR and participates and leads in research, provides analysis, and evaluates financial performance and strategic investments of the companies in the professional services market, including Accenture, Deloitte Consulting, Infosys, and TCS. Jennifer Hamill is a TBR analyst and is the lead author of TBR's customer research and vendor benchmark reports on the BI professional services market. She also provides company-specific coverage on IBM Global Services. Finally, we have with us Kevin Collupy, who is a research analyst here at TBR, where he focuses on cybersecurity, analytics, big data, mobility services, IT consulting, business IT consulting. And with that, let me hand this over to Patrick.
Great, thank you very much. And so what we're going to cover today is the Business Intelligence Services Vendors Benchmark. So I want to start off with the front and make sure it's clear to everyone that we're talking about business intelligence and analytics, but we're talking it very much from the services vendors perspective and our analysis, our research on that space, not BI as a whole. And that reflects the way that TBR actually does our research and the way that we look at companies. We build our analysis really from the ground up by looking at individual vendors and building our understanding of the marketplace based on what we see in each of the main or the most active or the largest vendors in any particular space. We build up that information from all kinds of different sources, public sources, our own primary intelligence. We speak with the vendors directly to understand what they're doing in the marketplace and why. With business intelligence in particular, though, we've also done a companion customer study. We've done customer research on buying behaviors, on budget, on what things that the business intelligence services vendors are hearing from their customers and which of those services vendors are sort of top of mind. What we're going to cover today is really only part of the entire benchmark. It's huge, it's exhaustive. We'll go into a little bit more detail about everything that's covered, but I want to start from the beginning by saying we're going to touch on some of the biggest themes that we saw over the course of this quarter in the business intelligence services vendor space, and then we'll take questions, of course, at the end for those areas either that we didn't cover or that we need to cover in more detail. So here you have the iconic slide for business intelligence as developed by TBR. That's our octopus hookah pipe there in the middle with its tentacles reaching out to companies, or perhaps it's the intelligence coming back in from those clients. We're not quite sure. What we've done here is we've grouped the different business intelligence services vendors into 5 categories or 5 groups. And that's something that's pretty common throughout TBR as a way for us to benchmark companies and look at their different performances. When you're comparing apples and oranges and bananas and pineapples, you need to find a way to group them and see what companies have the same or similar business models and then compare them against each other, even in a space as diverse as business intelligence. You can read the summaries here about what we think about those different groups. The real key point here is that IBM is a group all their own, and that's an exception. We don't have another benchmark at TBR where we have, I haven't the slightest idea how many, let's say 20 maybe benchmarks. There's not another benchmark that we produce where one company stands alone as a vendor, as its own vendor group. So IBM definitely stands apart. We're going to go into great detail as to why on that. And as you saw on the previous slide, there was a market estimate. Again, this is the business intelligence services market that we're looking at. And we're not surprised, really, to see that the benchmarked vendors, the ones that we're following most closely that we include in this benchmark, are outperforming the rest of the market. That's almost universally true across all of our research. It's one of the reasons why we pick the companies that we do, because they're doing things differently or growing faster or have the revenue already in place. They already have the scale. We are going to do, you can see this projection only goes out to 2016. We haven't broken these numbers down by service line. We're going to do a much more comprehensive and detailed market forecast later in this calendar year. One other thing I want to note on here, is it marked here somewhere about IT services? Maybe not. So the growth rate that we're seeing in business intelligence is considerably faster than the growth that we're seeing in IT services overall. And from TBR's perspective, looking at professional services, looking at cloud, looking at applications, encompassing all of IT services, that's sort of the foundational point. How are all those 30 core companies doing? Overall, they're not growing nearly as fast as the companies that are in this business intelligence services benchmark are doing. So, and with that, I will hand it over to Jen.
Thanks, Patrick, and hello, everyone. Let's take a deeper look at the BI professional services revenue performance by segment. We break down BI services revenue into 4 service lines according to the taxonomy that TBR developed. Near the end of the presentation, I'll show a slide with more detailed information, but as an overview, the 4 segments are consulting, integration and implementation, what you see as I&I, application development and maintenance, or ADM, and operations management and maintenance, OM&M. The graph we're looking at here shows the total revenue by segment of the 20 vendors in the benchmark. As we saw 6 months ago when we gave this webinar, BI consulting and I&I were the 2 largest and fastest growing segments in 3Q14. As clients are increasingly demanding advisory expertise to guide and accelerate BI solution deployments, vendors are investing heavily to build knowledge around BI, big data and analytics, or what we consider BI. As we'll see later in the presentation, when we get to the vendor-specific discussions, this is much easier said than done. But going forward, we view consulting, particularly around the industry-specific business issues, as a requirement that BI services vendors will need to earn client trust and build long-term relationships. So the big green bar here, I&I, is the largest segment by revenue, but it's unsurprising given the complexity involved with BI deployments. It's also one of the fastest growing service lines, which indicates to us that clients are moving quickly from the evaluation to action phase of integration to accelerate their time to value from BI investments. And operations and ADM are smaller and slower growing, which we expect will continue as clients increasingly look to consume BI through cloud-based platforms rather than on-premise deployments. Now on the next slide, let's take a look at the regional breakdown. Since the BI services market is still relatively immature, we're seeing growth rates decelerate as the rapid expansion from newer vendor entrants in 2013 began to normalize in 2014. Still, as Patrick mentioned earlier, the BI services market is outperforming the broader IT services market. I believe that growth rate was 1.5% in 3Q14, so it's a pretty big disparity, and this is true across the geographies. In Americas, slowing growth demonstrates the maturing market in the region. As enterprise clients in the U.S. transition from software-led to services-led vendors to generate more business value from BI, we believe competition among CNSI vendors will drive more buyer-centric pricing arrangements that slow near-term revenue growth in the Americas. In EMEA, despite the year-to-year deceleration, The region is growing the fastest of the three geographies, and we attribute this to recovering IT spending in Europe and the increasing interest in transformational benefits that analytics can provide, both to cut costs and to drive broader business outcomes. APAC growth slowed the least year to year, but still trailed the other two regions in 3Q due to the continued business environment challenges in China. We're seeing vendors focus more on under-penetrated countries such as Australia, India, and Japan through regional acquisitions and alliances. But before we get to the individual vendor performance, I wanted to take a minute on the next slide to share some highlights from our Companion BI Services Customer Research Program. As Patrick mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, TBR's research around BI professional services looks at the market from both the vendor and the buyer perspectives. This helps us guide our clients toward portfolio and go-to-market strategies that will meet the needs of their customers. As part of our customer research program, last month we published a report on buying trends around predictive analytics professional services. We found that the software-led vendors are still the go-to providers for services related to predictive analytics. But when we looked at the criteria customers are considering in vendor selection, survey respondents gave near equal consideration to industry expertise and application development skills. This puts services vendors in a much better position to shine as long as they bring both the industry knowledge to consult and solution design and the technical development capabilities to execute on the solution. And we believe IBM will continue to lead the sector as it can deliver the consulting through business analytics and strategy and offers the analytics application development capabilities that leverage its Watson cognitive analytics platform. I'll let Kevin provide more details, but we see Cisco's higher vendor incidence ranking in the predictive analytics services space as an indication of the company's success carving out a niche with consulting around industry-specific use cases for predictive analytics involving connected devices. And though they're not appearing at the top of the list currently, we believe CNSI vendors, Accenture, and Deloitte are best positioned to take share from the major software players as they can hone in on customers' industry-specific customization needs through consulting and ADM. And Boz will dig into this further a little later. So now let's look at the next slide and how the individual vendors performed in the broader BI services space in 3Q14. First, let me explain what we're looking at here, in case any of you are unfamiliar with TBR's standard bubble graphs. The x-axis shows BI services revenue growth for 3Q14 as compared to 3Q13. The y-axis shows operating margin for BI services, and the size of each bubble shows each vendor's volume of BI services revenue. It should be no surprise, given the title of the webinar, that IBM is the clear leader in terms of revenue. IBM is in a class of its own in this benchmark due to its strong brand identity across IT and its portfolio of integrated analytic solutions covering hardware, software, and services. CNSI vendors such as Accenture, Deloitte, and Capgemini also have sizable revenue from the space and are growing faster than IBM, for reasons that Patrick and Boz will get into in a few minutes. And the hardware-centric vendors are all over the map in terms of performance, but Cisco and Fujitsu stand out as growth leaders, though their overall revenue remains relatively small. And looking at the bottom left quadrant of the graph, we can see that the major software vendors, particularly Oracle, SAP, and SAS, are fading from the BI services space, which is expected since selling services is not as profitable for these vendors as software. Plus, with such a wide variety of other vendors looking to get into the BI services space, we expect these vendors will continue to step back and let their services partners act as sales and customer service channels. In the next few slides, we're going to dig a little deeper into a few vendors that I mentioned earlier, but let's start with the big blue elephant in the room, IBM. IBM continues to hold a unique position among the BI services vendors as it aggressively pursues the BI market from both the software and services angles. The blue bubble in the middle of the graph says it all, but just to give a sense of the scale of IBM's business in this area, the company generated more BI services revenue in 3Q14 than the next two largest vendors, Accenture and Deloitte, combined, and more than the bottom 11 vendors in the benchmark combined. IBM continues to stay ahead of competitors by addressing both IT and LOB needs and bringing the full weight of its hardware, software, and services resources to its engagement. The company also leverages high-profile alliances to offer best-of-breed BI solutions beyond its own IP portfolio, partnering, for example, with SAP in October to deliver the HANA platform on software. IBM represented 24.5% of benchmarked BI services revenue in 3Q, and its share has only declined slightly, about 20 basis points, in the last year, in comparison to the software-centric vendor group, which declined more than 100 basis points over the same period, which indicates to us that IBM's efforts to adapt to evolving buyer preferences are working. Looking forward, IBM improved its ability to cater both to LOB and IT buyer needs in the BI services space when it reorganized around solution units last month. They embedded a select number of consultants with industry and technology expertise into some of the units, including analytics and commerce, which will help them bring strategy and execution closer together and help to build client trust that will drive long-term managed services engagements. And we see this move as echoing the strategy-led go-to-market model that top-tier CNSI competitors such as Accenture, Deloitte, and PwC have all recently adopted, signaling that IBM will aggressively defend its dominant position in the BI services market. Now I'll turn it over to Kevin to walk through what the hardware-centric vendors are doing to gain BI services market share.
Thanks, Jen. Just want to take a moment to discuss some high-level views of the trends that we've been noticing here from hardware-centric vendors that we cover here at QBR. In the last year, we've been seeing an increasing interest around the capabilities of offering these higher value engagements, including consulting, partly driven by the commoditization of ITO services and increased pricing pressures from competition, namely the low-cost India-centric vendors. But vendors in general are attracted to these deeper engagements around advisory and consulting by the higher margins that these contracts often return. Hardware-centric companies such as Cisco and Fujitsu have benefited from strong year-over-year revenue growth around delivering professional services related to BI, also in part to their relatively new entrance and their smaller scale in this BI services space. These companies have similar technology portfolios to IBM, but they are lacking the consulting capabilities that IBM currently has. So in response, Cisco and Fujitsu are using managed cloud and network ecosystems as an entry point instead of the traditional consulting entrance point. We see this approach delivering short-term revenue growth, but limited business consulting capabilities will constrain these hardware-centric vendors' ability to differentiate and expand their BI services market share. Cisco is expanding its data and analytics integrated solutions. However, its lagging consulting capabilities places Cisco at a disadvantage, especially when these in-depth strategy services act as lead-in to implementations. To counter, Cisco recently released the Connected Analytics for its Internet of Everything portfolio, which includes consulting and takes a network-based approach to BI. This shows vendors a potential roadmap to survive by creating these market specializations. We expect to see vendors building around differentiators, taking an industry-specific approach to fend off competitors. All in all, hardware-centric vendors are getting by right now with services attached to their products, but are realizing that they need to improve their consulting and ecosystems to differentiate, to attract and retain clients, to expand their margins. That's a brief look of what we've been seeing and expect to see from some of the more product-driven IT providers in the BI space. And now on to the CNSI space.
Thanks, Kevin. So this is Patrick again. I'm going to talk now about the consulting and systems integration vendors. And what we're seeing, particularly Accenture and Capgemini and Deloitte, they're able to use established brand recognition to hire high-quality analytics experts. They're winning that war for talent and bringing in the right people. And they're able to turn around and then sell that business intelligence transformation engagement to clients. So it's beyond just the software, it's beyond just the hardware, it's really the whole transformation package. They build their ADM capabilities, cloud-based platforms, and that expands on the consulting projects. And it really provides an end-to-end BI service engagement, and they can do that better than even their India-centric peers. End-to-end is often used as a way of saying there's a lot of stuff here and it's hard to distinguish it and measure it. But in the case of these vendors, these CNSI vendors in BI services, they actually are really truly doing that. And in large part, it's because of the alliances that they have with their BI software partners. The major players that Jen mentioned, SAP, Oracle, even Microsoft, and even the smaller, more niche providers of business intelligence software, those partners really remain central to Accenture and Capgemini and Deloitte being able to continue with their BI services revenue growth. And, as an example of that, we saw Capgemini recently launch 3 new service offerings for Oracle Engineered Systems. Capgemini achieved their SAP HANA platform certification for extreme applications in the retail solution. We're actually going to be meeting with Capgemini next week, and one of the questions that we have for them is how rapidly they expect these new service offerings are going to bring in new clients, not just new revenues around business intelligence, but really new clients. Are they actually fulfilling that end-to-end promise that they make, and are they actually seeing those kinds of business intelligence transformation engagements that their competitors, Accenture and Deloitte, have done so well at? So that's a quick snapshot of that space, and now I'll hand it over to Boz for the next piece of this.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. So as Patrick mentioned, the consulting and system integrators are certainly going after their A game and then really adding to that layer of analytics. One thing to highlight on the next slide here is really maybe coming as a surprise to many of you to see Deloitte BI ADM revenue growth to be surpassing the rest of stack in that benchmark. The company still goes after consulting. That's the key and core area that basically they're doing is they're adding that layer of analytics. They have the capabilities. They have the best-of-breed talent in terms of the consulting, and they're educating the talent or they're acquiring talent from outside to deliver those services. But at the same time, they are expanding that end-to-end view for themselves. And what they're really doing is they're adding that was something that Deloitte was never famous about in the last decade. All we know about is Deloitte is consulting. But yes, they're coming from a much smaller base. When you look at the bubble comparing to IBM or any of the other large software vendors. However, Deloitte is certainly ramping up their capabilities, and that allows them to, their growth is surpassing them. What they're doing is, and it really is, okay, there is a buyer, IT buyer, LOB buyer. We can already talk to these folks. We have the permission to talk to them. Why lose that opportunity to deliver the end-to-end solution, end-to-end service? And we've been acquiring for a while, and we've been partnering, which is still a core channel for them. But why don't we bring up something in-house and really make that ADM to view us and be able to build a brand, just first of all, end-to-end IT services vendor, and drill down on the BI analytics, adding the analytics layer to its offerings. Just to kind of highlight a couple of examples, Deloitte recently opened 2 delivery centers in the U.S. with a capacity of over 1,400 employees, which we expect will drive BI services engagement that require closer client engagement through advisory and managed services. I mean, that's just a most recent example. They've been leveraging and tapping into offshore resources and nearshore resources, but certainly the company have realized, and the most recent appointment of the new global CEO, the CEO here in the U.S., and it's really kind of, okay, consulting is where we are, and that's what's driving the business right now on a global scale. What else is after consulting that we can tap into and really go after? Another example in terms of their approach for ADM capabilities is, like as I mentioned, is their partnership. In terms of a BI analytics, most recently they partnered with Digivisor, which was essentially enable the company to design and expand analytics business solutions, and also expand the alliance with Anaplan to deliver cloud-based business planning and analytics software, which really positions that, again, the company for end-to-end services. Just to contrast it compared to IBM, as I suggested earlier, the IBM revenue is much larger in terms of ADM, but the revenue growth is slower. It's just because IBM has a different approach that Deloitte has. So, for example, BI ADM revenue growth for IBM was just 9.4% year to year, compared to an average of 15.6% for the benchmark vendors. IBM's value proposition remains and centers on speed of implementation and a time for return on investment for BI solutions. although customization remains a core component of its services, especially delivered in Japan, and plays a key role in tailoring and analytics-enabled iOS application as part of the Apple Alliance. Just that customization approach that differentiates IBM because of revenue generation. I know Jen mentioned earlier the overarching BI, how they're in their own category. However, just to contrast and compare the growth leader versus the revenue size, just to kind of get a better perspective. On the next slide, we'll look into the other consulting and system integration vendor, Accenture, kind of like what they're doing. And maybe again, not a surprise here, one would expect maybe Deloitte will be the leading in the consulting, but we've seen Accenture's ability to convert the record bookings that they went through 2013 on the corporate level, which really reflected the ability to go after more consulting revenue, just in terms of revenue dollars, comparing to IBM and Deloitte, and kind of surpassing in terms of growth. Just to give you a sense of the growth rate, Accenture's BI consulting revenues expanded 23.7 versus 20.2 for IBM in the 3Q14 for the benchmark, particularly for the period for the benchmark that we are looking into. And again, it's the ability of Accenture. They went through a major reorganization over the last 12 months, and they're seeing that how it started paying off and leading with Accenture strategy, and having the layer of analytics from Accenture Digital and Accenture Operations, which really enhances the value that the company delivers against the LOB to the buyers, and enables really for faster decision making. What we see and we believe Accenture it's really happening is they're benefiting from a heightened demand for strategy consulting in high growth and developed regions, where IT spend is improving. Clients are looking to develop a long-term growth path, and analytics is becoming a key integral part of that long-term growth strategy. We expect the demand for IT transformation projects, particularly in the consumer-facing industries such as retail, to continue to generate BI consulting and system integration opportunities for the company, as clients look to permeate analytics across their portfolios and adopt technologies such as cloud and digital marketing into their business model to capture share through additional customer insights. Just a side note here for Accenture, and what we think is happening is that, as I mentioned, they sort of burned out through their bookings of 2013. So it will be really important for them to sustain that consulting growth is to maintain bookings. And their consulting bookings, I mean, we saw in the last quarter their corporate consulting bookings growth accelerated. So kind of like it's an indication of the company has a very aggressive goal in terms of overarching bookings of 34 to 36 billion for 2015. We believe the company will meet that goal. They have that relationship with the C-suite, but it was really critical to also to maintain the pace and kind of rebound from that deceleration growth in the past quarter and continue to ramp up more of the consulting bookings, which will allow them then convert because they already have the technology in space and they have the permission to talk to the C-suite. We have turn over to Jen.
Thanks, Boz. So as I promised earlier, I wanted to show the taxonomy definitions that we use when we're modeling BI services revenue, and also in our companion customer research. So when we ask the customers what BI services they're using, we use the same taxonomy and same definitions. I won't go into detail on the specific definitions. Everyone that registered for the webinar will get a copy of the presentation. But just in general, we view BI services through the same lens that we use on the overall IT professional services level. So we break the market down into these 4 basic service lines, which align with how we look at the broader professional services market. And as Patrick mentioned earlier, in talking about over our 20 benchmarks that we do here, at least in the TVR, it seems like there's more, but part of the value that TVR brings to these benchmarks is looking beyond what each company reports for service line revenue or segment revenue. Since every company has a different definition, we apply a uniform taxonomy that allows us to compare the vendors on an apples-to-apples basis. So let's look at the next slide just to wrap up here. This is a snapshot of the overall portfolio that we've been growing rapidly over the past year. You can see that the Business Intelligence Professional Services benchmark is just one part of a broader, much broader research portfolio that we have around business intelligence. And as Patrick mentioned, we're looking at market forecasts this year. We're always expanding the portfolio. So we're doing a lot in this area with a lot of insight to share. And then finally, this is the breakdown of the coverage in the particular benchmark that we covered today. So the areas that are highlighted in blue, those are the specific topics that we covered from a vendor basis, a couple of service lines, vendor segments. But you can see that there's a lot more that we deliver in the benchmark itself. We're really just scratching the surface with the half an hour that we're spending with you today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Justin to see if there's any questions.
All right, so.
We can do that first.
First question is, what leads you to believe BI&A business is shifting from software to services?
So that's a great question. I'll take a stab at it first. I think that there's two basic answers. First is looking at what's happening in the overall market for BI software versus BI services. As we saw a couple of slides ago, we have a whole research stream on the BI software, vendors and customer research. So I can give a sort of a broad overview of what I've seen, but there'll be more webinars diving deeper into the software side. But in general, we're projecting that at least in our last published BI software benchmark, that the market is growing at about a 4 to 5% rate, which is still faster than a lot of IT's growth. Yeah, but certainly not as fast as the BI professional services opportunity. And I think the reason for this, this is my theory, is that BI, even though people consider BI and analytics as an emerging technology, it's really been around for at least 20 years, if not more. It's business intelligence is an area that many companies have been doing for a long time. So there are a lot of companies out there that may have all the software that they need, and they just need help in optimizing it to drive the business outcomes that they're going for. And that's where the services vendors can really come in and deliver that extra business value through consulting that maybe a software vendor is they're just not focusing on delivering that. And then when you break it down into what we're covering in the actual benchmark, looking at the software-led vendors versus the services-led vendors, we're seeing the software-led vendors growing slower and, basically exiting the market. And we see this as by choice. As we mentioned before, this is not very profitable for a product company to be delivering services, at least to the level of detail that many clients, have come to expect. They're looking for vendors to really understand their business on a very granular level and deliver outcomes that are very specific to their needs. So this is not an area that we see software vendors really looking to invest in. We really see them focusing more on the technology and the higher margin areas. So it's an opportunity for services vendors to come in, partner with the software firms, and basically take the handoff from the software firms to manage the engagement going forward. My answer. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
That's great.
Okay.
All right, the next question is, what do you see as digital's role in the future of BI&A?
So this is Patrick Heffernan. One of the things that we're developing right now is a benchmark around digital marketing services, and we're about to publish one on advertising technology. So those will cover, I don't think there's any overlap in the vendors, but it does cover the entire digital marketing space and digital marketing services broadly, with ad tech as a part of it. So as we've been working on those benchmarks and examining those vendors in that space, one thing that we can see that applies from there into analytics and into business intelligence more specifically is the acceleration that digital puts into all of these practices. So whereas previously business intelligence and analytics may have remained in a particular part of an organization, whether it was in strategy or in supply chain or in some aspect of running the business, with digital, both digital marketing and then the broader digital transformation piece, we can see that it allows an acceleration of all of the analytics and all the business intelligence throughout the rest of the really the entire sort of business ecosphere. I mean, it's not only your own enterprise, but your partners, your strategic partners, your sort of tangential partners, your customers, of course, your suppliers, everybody. So we see it as, I'm going to use the word for the third time, it's an accelerator. Our research at the moment has focused on digital marketing services, and there's a great presentation we did probably 3 weeks ago now, where we laid out exactly what the taxonomy is around advertising technology and digital marketing services, and how it fits into a broader piece that you could call digital transformation. So that includes social and mobile and e-commerce and all that. And as you expand outward, you get into parts of an enterprise that will take us plenty of time to research in the kind of depth that we're used to. And that's why we're focused on one piece now, which is digital marketing services. So I'd be happy to follow up if there are other questions on that. Reach out to me. It's an area that we've been doing a lot of research on just over the last few months. And again, we're prepared to roll out a benchmark in the next month or so.
All right, the next question is, analytics can mean anything from analyzing data by reading a sales report to deep predictive analytics around market performance, modeling of intended actions, and predictions of outcomes. How do you see analytics fitting with BI?
So this question, I think I can start to answer it, but really I would encourage you to attend our BI software benchmark webinars as they become available. But just to give you an overview of the taxonomy that we use on the software side, we include analytics, really a broad variety of BI tools within our analytics definition. So yes, it does include spreadsheets, reports, those more basic tools, but we're also looking all the way up to more advanced tools, predictive analytics being one of them. And we also include the data warehousing market, as well as BI applications and platforms. So really, we take a very broad view of BI, so I think anything that you would consider analytics, we're capturing it in our research.
Right, and for us, business intelligence is in many ways for us is an umbrella that captures a lot of the different services. They're not necessarily all just analytics, and it allows us to, as Jem mentioned before, when we're doing a benchmark and we're trying to compare what Accenture does to what Microsoft does to what Hitachi does in terms of services, we have to find a way to describe all of those things similarly. The analogy I use a lot is that they're all fruit. There's no meats and cheeses. It all has to be fruit, but they're different kinds of fruit. So business intelligence is our way of creating a fruit basket, and that includes analytics and it includes a lot of the other stuff you think of.
All right, the next question. How do you see the demand for BI versus predictive analytics? Will BI overshadow predictive analytics?
So as I mentioned earlier, we consider predictive analytics to be part of BI, but our recent customer research showed that the interest in advanced tools, including predictive analytics, is growing. So even though adoption may be lower than the more basic tools such as reporting and spreadsheets, the number of people that are considering buying those in the future exceeds the current adoption rate, whereas the more basic tools is the much more mature market, and not as many people are really pursuing those areas. So we definitely see demand for advanced tools expanding.
And we're seeing across the broader IT services market, when we look at whether it's management consulting or whether it's global delivery, anywhere that there's an emerging technology, and I would consider predictive analytics in that group, what we've seen is that clients have become so much more used to the last best user experience being what they're going to get going forward, and so much more used to technology being, look, if I can use my iPhone to do all these kinds of things, I ought to be able to use my internal IT and my enterprise IT. And that changes the demands that are put on both the folks running internal IT, but also on the IT services vendors to always be providing that cutting edge emerging technology. Now, that said, of course, there's a difference between the line of business leader who wants predictive analytics and the IT director who understands both the cost and the implications of bringing that on board in a company. But I think we're seeing it across the entire IT services, professional services space, where something as exciting and new and cool as predictive analytics gets a lot of attention because clients are simply used to now getting technology that's exciting, new, and cool. Did that make sense when I said that? All right. Okay.
All right. The next question. Will hardware-centric vendors be able to find adequate consulting capabilities, or will they continue to struggle?
A really good question, and thankfully we have Kevin here who's looking particularly at the hardware-centric vendors, so you get to tackle that.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate that. We expect to see more of the same in the near term, selling products and attaching services. It's an easy sell for the hardware company, and it's an easy purchase for the BI buyer. This is likely going to come at the cost of the software and hardware-centric vendors. This is, just gathering my thoughts here. I'm just debating where I should stand on this, because I've had the same question myself, and I kind of go a few different ways. And I think in the long term, the best approach for these hardware-heavy companies, you take a vertical specific approach and carve out a niche in the industry. Really build around that and scale up from there. We really do expect to see the management consulting firms to gain traction in this space. That's really my thoughts.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you look at a company like IBM that sheds so much of its hardware, and in this particular space, they're doing as well, if not much better than they're doing in a lot of other markets that we look at IBM performing. So the other hardware-centric vendors would be hard to press to follow that model, but you're saying they could become more specialized, more focused around some niche play, yeah, and that will allow them to continue at least to get the good margins, if not the revenue size, right?
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Will Accenture and PwC try to chase Deloitte into ADM copying their strategy? Could they do that?
So no one in the room at the moment knows Accenture and Deloitte better than Boz, so we'll let him tackle that question. No surprises there, though, right?
Well, try not to. Well, in terms of ADM capabilities and looking at those two particular companies, I mean, Accenture has its legacy ADM capabilities, so they already have that in-house. When it comes to BI, as I mentioned earlier, they have been adding that layer of analytics to its consulting offerings through Accenture Digital and Accenture Operations. So Accenture, again, positioned itself as an end-to-end. They certainly after more of the higher value consulting engagement, because bottom line, once you get into the door with a C-suite executive and you're able to talk to both the LOB and IT buyer, you'll be able to upsell your end-to-end portfolio, including ADM. So that's what Accenture is really trying to do right now. So we saw conversion of consulting bookings, but that's their core focus, because they went back a month ago in the management consulting space, looking at Accenture and how their management consulting capabilities are kind of contrasting comparing to Deloitte. Their share of pure management consulting is still a fraction of what Deloitte does, so they're really trying to gain that space. For PwC, in terms of ADM, again, really a core consulting vendor. ADM is still a fraction, looking at the corporate level, corporate professional services. So it is still new to them in terms of how the company positions itself. The alliance with Google a couple of months ago certainly gives them an opportunity to expand more of technology space and app space. But they are getting slowly, but I don't think there will be a threat to Deloitte anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. I mean, you could add, PwC is so much more strategy consulting centric. I mean, they acquired Booz & Company. That was despite Booz & Company having a Booz digital practice that was substantial and allowed PwC to go from having little bits and pieces of a digital practice to a real substantial one. I still think that PwC is a consulting strategy-led first company. So I think I agree with Boz that I don't see them heading down the road that Deloitte's gone down. Not in the near term, and I don't know, not likely in the longer term either.
All right, there you have one final question here. Do clients move from consulting to implementation and integration faster in BI than the same transition in other IT areas, such as cloud?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure that we mentioned this earlier, but we do have an entire other research stream devoted to cloud. We've been doing cloud adoption studies for a number of years. Our BI customer research is a little bit newer, so we don't have as much comparative data. But we are seeing that the adoption trends in BI are following around the same overall pattern that we saw in cloud professional services, which is, customers are looking for assistance now, to assess their current IT environment, to evaluate their options around BI, and as competitors are really moving faster to adopt BI solutions, we're seeing that customers are the window between evaluating solutions and actually deploying them is becoming shorter because they have to keep up with their competitors. With cloud, there's a little bit a longer tail, I'd say, to start because it's such a new technology, and it's really more about cost reduction, and so you can kind of take your time in considering your options and how you're going to adapt your entire IT environment to encompass cloud. Whereas BI, it runs the gamut. You can do a point solution that addresses a very specific, quick hit business problem, or as part of a broader transformation. So, in general, we're seeing the incidence, of customers having purchased BI consulting and integration, as well as those who are evaluating it, certainly growing at a much faster rate than we saw in cloud.
And I think that's a good way of pointing out that a lot of these questions kind of came at business intelligence from a few different angles and pull in a lot of the different research streams that we have at TBR. And so our assessment and our analysis of what's happening in this space is very much informed by what we're seeing in IT services broadly, in management consulting, in cloud, in all the different areas of technology that we as a market research firm actually cover. So, I want to point again to the slide that's on the screen and just emphasize that we scratched the surface here. There's a lot more in this benchmark, so feel free to reach out to talk further if you have any other questions. I think that's it in the queue, so I think we're probably good to wrap up. Justin?
Yep, yeah, that's it. Thank you, Patrick, Boz, Kevin, and Jen, and thank you, everybody, for your questions today. You can follow all the analysts on Twitter at their handles listed here, and please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well. Additionally, before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated. We'll leave the chat function open for another 5 minutes or so to give folks a chance to ask any last-minute questions. Otherwise, we'll see you again next quarter. Thanks.